5 JRPGs worth playing and buying at full price, and 5 that are not. That's what we're talking about in this video. I'm not going to waste your time with a long, drawn-out intro because you're probably going to skip it anyway, so let's just jump into the first game that's worth your time and money, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, why is it worth it? Well, if you're like me and you're on a tight budget and you need a game that's long and that's going to last you a while, well, Xenoblade 3's got you covered, with it being over 60 hours just for the main game and much more if you want to do everything it has to offer. And it's not just long, but it's a quality game with an 88 OpenCritic score, and for whatever this is worth, it was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. And like I said, it's just a good game. I feel like with this one, Monolith Soft took everything they've learned from past Xenoblade games and put it together in a nice tight package here. It's got a compelling story, a great cast of characters, including the hero characters you're going to want to recruit along the way. And I think this is the best version of this combat system that they've done yet. Now, the UI could use some work, but as you play the game, it becomes less of a big deal and you won't even pay attention to it. If you love JRPGs, Xenoblade 3 is an absolute must-play game in 2022. Now, for the first game that's not worth it, it pains me to say this, but it's Digimon Survive. Now, I say it pains me because I came in wanting to love this game. I love the concept of going to this other world and you're trying to survive. It had cool character designs, and I didn't mind that it was more visual novel than anything else. However, after playing it, it's just boring. Yet you do have long stretches of visual novel segments that are broken up with strategy RPG gameplay, but that gameplay segment is just too simple and it's just not very fun. There's very little strategy that goes into it. And it's a real shame, like I said, because this art style is really beautiful. And overall, it's just not a super compelling story. I tried playing for several hours and I got bored and I just kind of stopped playing because I couldn't get through it. No matter how big of a sale you'll see this for, I say it's not worth it from your time alone. I would say it's better spent elsewhere. One of 2022's surprise gems for me was Stranger of Paradise. Now, it's debatable if it is a JRPG, but whatever, I just want to talk about it again. Now, for its structure, it's a level-based RPG and a total reimagining of the original Final Fantasy. Yeah, it's pretty hammy, it's got a cringe story, but it's weirdly entertaining. It's like watching a really good B-movie. But I think the real star of the show is its amazing combat. It's super challenging and fun. It's all about learning enemy movements and patterns so you can dodge or block or parry at just the right time. A lot of people compare this to Dark Souls or just Souls-like games in general, and from a challenge perspective, it's definitely in that same category. As you go through the game, you'll be unlocking a huge variety of classes that are all really fun to try, and you'll want to try them all out just to see which one matches your gameplay style the best. And there's also tons of content, including a lot of post-game content that will unlock and will allow you to do just so much more. And if you can't get enough, they've released tons of DLC for this game post-launch, so you'll have tons to go through. Now, if the cringy chaos turned you away, don't let it. This is a fantastic game that you can probably get pretty cheap now, but even if you did have to pay a little bit less than full price, it's absolutely worth every penny. Now, the game that gets my award for the most disappointing JRPG of 2022 has to be Soul Hackers 2. It had all the potential in the world. It had an incredible art style, great character designs, and it essentially has Persona's combat system that everybody loves. However, it just doesn't do anything with that. To me, the biggest problem was the boring design overall. The city is kind of small and limited, you can't really explore too much. And the dungeons, oh my god, they are just painfully boring. Especially the character ones where you have to walk around in that really boring environment. And the story dungeons aren't that much more interesting either. And while the story starts with a bang, it's not that compelling and probably won't be able to pull you through the rest of the game. Also, I just feel like overall the game is just slow. And I feel like that's the case because the developers patched in a dash so you could run faster in the dungeons, and also the ability to speed up the combat. Now, when you have to speed through your game, I feel like it's just boring and you didn't do a good job designing it. Because if that's the case, you wouldn't need to add in these speed up mechanics. Overall, Soul Hackers 2 is the epitome of unrealized potential. In a post-Persona 5 world, we just expect more, especially from Atlus, the people that made Persona. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with this, but I feel like we shouldn't be settling for mediocrity, and there's only so much time to play games, and I feel like they should be spent playing the best games possible. And again, even if you find this for a steep discount, to me, it's just boring and not worth your time. Now, to piggyback off that, in a game that's clearly inspired by Shin Megami Tensei, let's talk about Monarch. Now, Now, this was another game that looked cool on the surface. It was set in a Japanese high school, it had a darker tone, and had a kind of unique art style. And to be fair, it does do a few cool things. It's got unique combat, these mystery solving segments that can be kind of cool, and an overall interesting story. However, there's one thing that absolutely kills it, and that is the performance. The game just has these awful frame rate dips and overall just doesn't look very good. It has some pretty low quality textures. And in 2022, that's just unacceptable in my opinion. Now, to me, the game isn't very visually demanding, so it really speaks to the team's technical shortcomings. Now, if you're looking back on the year and wanting to play some JRPGs that you might have missed earlier in the year, don't bother with Monarch. Now to move on to one of my favorite JRPGs of the year, the Diofield Chronicle. Now here's something really weird, it's from the same developer as Monarch. They must have gotten some really good direction from Square Enix that helped them because this game is leagues better. Now, it's a real-time strategy RPG with a really unique art style. In the gameplay itself, you'll have a squad of 4 characters that play out in relatively short strategy battles, somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes. And to me, what's really compelling is that it's basically a series of micro strategy decisions. The battles aren't going to be that long, but you get into a little scenario and you go, okay, which abilities do I want to use? How do I want to position my characters? And you get through it relatively quick. Now, admittedly, the game does get a little repetitive, however, it always is throwing something different at you. Once you finish up a battle, you'll want to go back to your base and level up your characters, maybe to partake in a side mission to get some new loot, see what's going on with the story, or interact with one of your characters. Whatever you're doing, there's always something new that's going on, and it's never lasting too long, so you can kind of just move from one thing to the next. Now, to me, what really makes the game is the character Waltaquin. She's easily my favorite character of any game this year. I will say at the beginning, the story is relatively boring, but once she comes in, she totally shakes things up. I like to relate her to the Joker in a lot of ways. She just likes to create chaos for fun, and it makes for some really compelling story moments. And I guess the development team had their ear to the ground because they're going to be adding new story content for Waltaquin early next year in a free update. Overall, the Diofield Chronicle is just a great game that you can probably get pretty cheap now, and it's going to be having new content coming next year that'll be totally worth playing. Another game that pains me to put it on this list as not worth it is Valkyrie Elysium. Now, I say it pains me because I actually kind of liked it when I played it, but in hindsight, it's just not worth it. It completely changes gameplay styles to an action RPG that's much more level-based and linear. The story itself is also relatively boring. Now, it does have a twist if you want to call it that, but you'll see it coming a mile away. To me, it feels like they just had another game they were working on and slapped the Valkyrie name onto it. And the reason I say that is because it doesn't feel very cohesive. There's this kind of bland art style that they added a black cel shading border to. They have combat, while it's not bad, overall just feels uninspired. And you'll also be seeing the same enemies a lot, especially in the final stretch of the game where it's just this gauntlet of every enemy in the game with seemingly no rhyme or reason to it. And maybe the most surprising thing is that it's only about 12 hours long. Now, I don't mind shorter games, but it's gotta be super jam-packed with quality and production value, and Valkyrie Elysium just doesn't have that. Now, since the release, they have added free story content, which is appreciated, but again, I just feel like it's not worth your time and money. Maybe for curiosity's sake on a deep sale, but in the end, I feel like you're just not gonna be satisfied. Now, one of the most satisfying games of the year for me, and probably will be for you, is Trails from Zero. We've been waiting a long time for this game, and it has been totally worth it. It's the missing middle chapter in the greater Trail saga, and arguably the best one. It has a much tighter story with a much smaller scope. Now, that sounds like a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing because you'll get to know your team from the very beginning as you're all together from the start, and you'll get to know each other in deeper ways. Not to mention, you'll get to know the region of Crossbell much better as well because you're constantly going to the same areas over and over again. And again, I know that sounds like a bad thing, but by the end, you're gonna feel like you know this place so well, and it just makes for a better, tighter game experience. Now, despite it being a much older game, it does have a few new features that make it shockingly playable. They've added turbo mode to speed the game up. They've added voice acting, newer character portraits, not to mention a total facelift for the visuals. And in terms of just pure dollar to hour value, it's over 40 hours for the main story alone, with much more if you want to do everything the game has to offer. And here's the cool thing, its sequel and the closing chapter to this duology is coming in March 2023, right around the corner. So if you didn't get a chance to play it, definitely play it right now. It's going to be the perfect time, especially if it's on sale, and you'll get ready for the new game coming out next year. You know we eventually had to talk about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, right? Now, if you somehow haven't heard, this game is a technical mess. terrible frame rates, crashes, glitches, and overall it just doesn't look very good visually. Now, despite people having a lot of fun and enjoying the game, I just feel like this is totally unacceptable for Pokemon. It's the biggest media brand in the world. Yes, more than Star Wars, Marvel, and Winnie the Pooh? Huh, didn't know it made that much money. But for Pokemon, when you're making this much money, you can't have your premier product in such a poor state. Now, if you're enjoying the game despite all the issues, I'm happy for you. However, I just think we should be expecting better from our games, and the only way that companies hear us is through our money. Sadly, that probably won't matter for this one because Scarlet and Violet has already broken tons of records. For my time and money, especially at full price since it just came out, I feel like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet just isn't worth it, and to respect your time and money, I feel like it wouldn't be either, and you should just wait until this game either goes on a deep sale or they finally patch it. Now, one of the best JRPGs of 2022 and a game that's worth every single penny is Triangle Strategy. This is a strategy RPG from the good people who brought us Octopath Traveler and Bravely Default. It has a gorgeous art style, incredible music, fantastic gameplay and level design, which I think is lacking in most strategy RPGs in my opinion. I think something that Triangle Strategy does really well is it marries mechanics to level design in really fantastic ways. And the story is really unique in that you have to make these decisions that drastically change the outcome of the game. You'll run into different levels, have different characters on your team, and there's even multiple endings. Now, a single playthrough would take you about 35 hours, but it's totally worth replaying for different levels, different story, and just seeing how the game ends. If you enjoy JRPGs, particularly strategy RPGs, Triangle Strategy is a must-play game and absolutely worth every cent you spend on it. Now, we talked about a lot of games in this video, and I actually reviewed most of them, so if you want to hear my full thoughts on them, click into this playlist right here to watch all my reviews from this year, including even more great games that I didn't have the time to talk about in this video. And if you enjoy JRPGs and want more content just like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.